I'm glad you did.
Good evening. I'd like to start the village board meeting for the Village of Cary for Tuesday, January 7th, 2020. To order with roll call, please.
Weinhammer? Here. Kraus?
Here.
Cavelli? Here. Collier?
Here.
Betts? Here.
Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Welcome to everybody. Happy New Year. Our first meeting of 2020, a new decade. So we're excited about what's going to be transpiring in the next couple of years. We do have several people that are signed in for public comment. I do want to remind that we allow 3 minutes per person for public comment. So if you could kindly limit your conversations or your comments to 3 minutes. Just as another note, this isn't a conversational. This is where you can address the village board and we can hear your comments. And at a later time, we can pick up offline with staff to go over any concerns that you may have. So that being said, David Miller.
David Miller, 65 Highway 14, Cary. I have some handouts too.
I just saw the email, sorry.
Hey, I'm good, thanks. I haven't seen it though.
Nope.
Yeah, we got one. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Happy New Year. Thanks, Dave.
All right, my concerns about the subdivision of the Selkie property that I've been told, and I believe been told the truth, but there's nothing in writing from Thornton to say what they're doing. 3 acres is not necessary for a gas station, but required for video gaming. They say that they're not going to be doing video gaming, but it opens the door for future boards and future mayors to change it and let them go ahead and do it. With nothing in paper, nothing written in stone saying they're not going to do it, I'm very concerned. Video gaming should be for mom and pop establishments. And the town was originally designated to help out local businesses improve their properties, which has done a very good job at doing. And I believe that if they did want to do it, it's just helping out big corporation. In the handouts I gave, they say they're not going to do a commercial fueling station. And everything I looked up online says it needs to be at least 3 acres or more to make it a commercial fueling station that allows them 24-hour video gaming. The very back of the sheets, I showed a picture of a commercial fueling station that doesn't take up much room. And the very last sheet shows their plat that they're proposing on doing. And there's plenty of room to do with a commercial fueling station. It's a big open area they haven't decided what they're going to do with yet. And I'm just very concerned. I just want to put in on the record that that's my concern, and I just hope that the board, and I believe this board will stick to it, but future boards and future whoever, this has been a concern of mine. So I appreciate your time and have a good evening.
Thank you, Dave. Dave Henry?
All right, no handouts. I'm concerned about the Sulky property also. You're about to approve, I mean, I'll tell you, I'm not opposed to a gas station, don't get me wrong, but you're about to approve a PUD which has required findings in your ordinances, of which after I've looked through the display, the documents that they've submitted, I can see 3 that they have that are yeses, 2 items which are a maybe, and 5 items that are not even shown as far as what is required for a PUD. Even if it is a preliminary PUD, you still need to provide things like traffic patterns, appearances, signage. These kind of things are required in order to achieve a PUD. What they're asking for right now is nothing more than a subdivision. And it's not even a very good subdivision in that they've taken most of the frontage for themselves and they created a lot behind them, which is going to be really hard to sell. So I'd like you to think about carefully what they're giving, what they're asking for and what you're giving them at this point. On a separate note, and I know it's not a feedback thing, but I was kind of curious as to how many police vehicles we actually have in the village, and what is the largest number of people, police, on patrol at any given time. Because I've counted 14 cars out there before, and I'm sure there's at least 2 out on the streets at that point. And I can't see why a village this size has 16 police vehicles, if I'm guessing right. That's all.
Thank you, Dave. Linda Palliser? Okay.
What we're requesting is to have the village change the ordinance for a 6-second interval for messages. I would love to have you cut it in half. I'm more than happy to have it go at 3 seconds. I can understand why you don't want to have the messages moving and you don't want the flash. I'm totally good with it. But we have for all these years, and we're the only business in Cary that puts out community events. And the 6 seconds is just too long. And evidently the village itself thinks so as well. Because when they put up the sign for Mary Carey, it was running.
At 1 second.
And my husband has it.
I have the videotape.
Yes.
You were running it at 1 second. Last night I went around to the other message boards in town. They were anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 seconds long. We've been doing a little bit of research, and in regard to the United States Sign Council, it says most communities permit changing messages on display, on signs displaying time and temperature with no restriction on timing. To apply a different standard to signs displaying commercial or non-commercial messages would be to regulate on the basis of the content of the sign in violation of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. We understand that 1 second could be too long, even if that's what you use to do the Mary Carey parade, and we understand what you want to do in regard to graphics and everything else. But to have a message for 6 seconds is too long, especially for somebody at a stop sign. They're not going to look at it. We have the statistics here from other councils in regard to the time span. Most people will look at their iPhones between 2 and 4 seconds long, and after that they disengage. So these rules, these regulations were set up many, many, many years ago. But to get our message out at 6 seconds a panel is too long. We'd like to see if we can cut it back, not just for us, but for everybody else in town. And truthfully, if 6 seconds is really what you want to stick with, and I can't get our messages out, then I don't think we can get anybody else's either. So we'd like the council, we'd like the village to take a look at it. Everybody here in town that has a message board. We're trying to be, the best we can for our patients, but also for the community. So anything we can help with, anything we can answer, please give us a call, let us know. But in regard to the violation letter that we got, it says
We have to be in compliance by next Monday.
by next Monday, or else it'll be $100
$750
per day.
per day.
So, you tell us where you want to go with this. I don't want to be running up a bill, but I also want the village to understand what our concerns are. And again, if I'm going to be in violation, then I think every message board, whether it be the churches, whether it be the schools, whether it be other businesses, should also be held to the same, things. Again, we have stacks of what we do as far as community messages out there. I don't see other businesses do that. But again, it's something that we'd like you to consider. And please let us know about it 13. We will change our sign back if we haven't heard from you.
All right, what we'll do is we'll run this by the board. I appreciate your comments here. We did a blitz. We had several complaints from other businesses saying that people were not in compliance. So we did a blitz of everything, and you're not the only person that was cited for this. So Jake or staff will get back with you as to the next steps, and we'll talk about it with the board. You may need time to take a look at this again.
Okay, because again, you did put on a January 13th deadline for us. So we're trying to make this work.
Yeah, we'll be in touch with you before that.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I just have a question for you guys here. So Palliser, are you the dentist on the
Right.
corner then up there?
Yep.
Okay, and you got a letter stating that you were out of compliance with our sign ordinance and stuff?
Right.
And you said we've sent out other letters to people? A lot
Yes,
of-
we have. Yep, absolutely.
Did you guys hear anything about this? Why aren't we being apprised of what's going on?
I believe it was in the Community Development Director's update that's sent
Okay.
out to the board weekly.
We did set it to 6 seconds long. We asked our patients that were stopped at the stoplight waiting to turn in. What did you get from the message?
Nothing. And it wasn't until Carrie put up for Mary Carey, which we have actually put up for you in the past. But you did your own, and you did it at 1 second for each frame. Not so good.
Right, you got your message out.
Yep.
So
Thank
we
you.
can,
Thank
make
you for
things better.
taking the time to come.
Yep.
Is there anybody else that would like to address the village board? Okay, we'll go ahead and close.
One minute.
Okay.
Hi, I'm kind of find myself between a rock and a hard place. I'm in unincorporated McHenry County on Cary Algonquin Road at Classen Road. Is everybody familiar with that area? I have you probably all remember the old barn that was there that I dismantled a couple of years ago. Right now, I've applied to McHenry County for a little bit of a zoning, not a zoning change exactly, a use change. The property had been abandoned for probably about 20 years. It was all overgrown. I don't know if anybody's driven by there or seen the improvements I've made, but I've cleaned it up substantially. And what I'd like to do now is keep it as a nursery. Unfortunately, in McHenry County, as a nursery, I can't import any trees. I can only sell trees that I grow on the property, or bushes or anything to that nature. So I'd like to return it to a farm and grow trees on it and eventually sell the trees. But I can't wait 5, 10 years, where my wife and I are both in our 70s now, so we're not going to wait, till we're 80 to start selling trees. So I would like to incorporate it into Cary. I talked to Brian Simmons about that. It sounds like the board isn't in favor of me doing anything like that over there. They would like it, their 30-year plan or their long-term plan is for residential use. But there's no sewer and there's no water there. I'm surrounded on 3 sides by forest preserves. So I think it's a really good place to grow trees and to sell trees. And what I'm looking to do is a wholesale trees to landscapers, maintain trees, plant trees, but not have retail traffic coming in there or not. And McHenry County won't allow me to do that unless I get a conditional use. With the conditional use, I have to give them 20 additional feet of right-of-way because it's a county-owned road. And that 20 feet of right-of-way, because my property is about 8 feet lower than the road, prohibits me from screening the property. I probably should have brought one. Brian is right here. I don't know. I should have asked Brian to bring the plan that I submitted, my landscaping plan. But the plan showed for arborvitaes to be all along the front of the property. So the property was entirely screened from the outside. None of my neighbors have objected. I've talked to the 2 neighbors that are closest to me. They have absolutely no problem with it. What I'm asking Carrie is I'd like to incorporate, but I'd like to incorporate as a nursery and keep it as zoned as a nursery. And I've got parking available there now for trucks, any equipment that I need for the nursery business. That parking is all established. My grading is all pretty much complete as far as stormwater management. I've got a few things left to do on that, but they're pretty minor at this point. So I'd really like to see if the board has any interest in allowing me to keep the agricultural use rather than rezoning it to residential.
Could you give us your name? Could you give us what your name is?
Pardon me?
What is your name?
Michael Weyruch, Weyrauch.
And you said you've gone to Mr. Simmons already and talked to him about trying to incorporate into the
We
village
did,
of
and he
Cary?
kind of ran it by whoever he needs to talk to about that. And
Okay.
it seemed like whoever he ran it by wasn't at all interested in keeping it as a nursery. And I'm at zoned AG1 with the non-conforming use now. I took the smaller barn on the property and converted it into a house for my wife and I. I won't have any employees there except my wife and I. Anybody else would be outside employees to plant trees and so forth. They might come in and pick up trees and plant trees. No intentions at all of a retail business there, strictly a wholesale business where I sell to landscapers. They all need a place to get trees, and they drive up to Wisconsin, Michigan, everywhere. Some of the landscapers will have sales tax numbers for resale, some of them won't. The ones that don't, I'll charge sales tax. That sales tax would come into Cary.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for bringing this forward. Would this be another thing that was in the community update,
This
development
just
update?
happened like today.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a
I'm
conversation.
just wondering, I just kind of like to get a feel if I should pursue this any further with Brian, if there's any point in it, or if the board is hard and fast on, we want it to be residential.
Is it contiguous enough that we could incorporate it?
Yeah, the property currently is contiguous to the village. It's right next to the Fox Bluff Conservation property. So it is contiguous to the village of Cary. There are no utilities that go to that location. And then we did have a border agreement with the village of Algonquin that basically established Classen Road as the boundary between the two villages. And this property was south of that border, more on the Algonquin side of that agreement. So it is contiguous to us. He's the only, we're the only village that his property actually connects to. So it's the only village that it could be annexed to at this point.
We would too. Typically, there'd be an annexation agreement that would work out with the property owner. And in this case, since they want to incorporate in the village of Cary, we would require them to run utilities to the property. Obviously, I think that's going to be a challenge here because I don't think it's going to be a short run at all, but that's how we would do it for other properties, and we want to be consistent with that practice.
However, there could be an exception.
Yeah, that would be up to the village board.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We'll
Does
get some
that
more,
mean-
we'll get more information from you, sir, and
And I'll talk to Brian
Talk to
about that.
Brian.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to address the village board? Thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comment at 6:17. I got a few things on my report, employee-related issues. We have Steve Kopez, which is with our Public Works Department. He's been with the Village of Cary for 20 years. Steve, do you want to come up?
Only I could hide back here.
Yeah.
Congratulations, 20 years. Long time.
Yeah.
Steve's been with the village for 20 years. He just stepped into a new role with the Village of Cary. He is our Public Works Superintendent. He's had some big shoes to fill, and he has done it quite successfully. And we're really happy to have him on board. Having somebody that's got the knowledge about the Village of Cary, where we've been and where we're going, it's instrumental to our continued growth and our success. So thank you very much. We have a very small token of our appreciation for you. So thank you.
Thanks,
So
Chief.
Eric's got some things he wants to add to that. Probably.
I think you said it perfectly. I don't have a lot more to add, but no. Steve is a great example of a lot of our dedicated employees, and he has worked his way through the ranks to be in charge of our operations and maintenance division. And he did have great big shoes to fill, but he's definitely taken his own path and put his own stamp on the department. And I look forward to many more exciting things to come as you work your way to leading this department. So appreciate it, and looking forward to the next 100 years.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Along with employees, and we talked about succession planning. Okay. Hi, good. One of those badges? I don't need no stinking badge. Again, with our succession planning and the growth of our village, with people retiring and moving up, it's our pleasure to welcome new employees into the village and to promote existing employees of the village. So we have a new employee today who is joining our police department. We have Jeremy Duncan. He's going to be sworn in as a police officer. Is he still here? Did he take off? Jeremy, this is a family event, so if you have any family members that would like to rally around you while you take your oath, that would be great.
And I believe his father's going to pin your badge? Is that? And just a little bit about Jeremy before you administer the oath of office is that Jeremy attended Beloit College. He is currently at the Suburban Law Enforcement Academy attending basic law enforcement training course. He was the captain of the Beloit baseball team when he was in college. And he comes from a law enforcement family. I believe grandfather was a police officer in Hoffman Estates, James Dutton. And then you have a cousin that's a police officer in Crystal Lake. See, I got it all right. I didn't even know. I know.
So this is a great day. We are surrounded by our men and women in blue. We also have our police commission back here that is here to support you and welcome you to the Village of Cary. We hope that you find it an exciting career for you and keep us safe. So without further ado, let's get you sworn in, okay? You want to raise your right hand, please? State your name.
Jeremy Dutton.
Having been appointed to the office of police officer
I've been appointed to the office of police officer
in the Village of Cary,
in the village of Cary,
in the county of McHenry,
in the county of McHenry,
aforesaid,
aforesaid,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of police officer
of the office of police officer
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Taking the oath?
Chief,
Oh, you're good?
You want to get up here? Chief, you want to come up with a picture?
You should go there. Behind the podium. So apparently, we're getting our picture taken over there. And for me, she has to do the white line.
Thank you very much. Oh, you're good.
That's right behind you.
Picture on it.
By the way, I'd be remiss in not identifying that our police commission's here. So Chairman Levicki, Secretary Shanakis, and Jeffrey Kraus, who's just a member. Kraus? Prager. I got you. I made you police commissioner. They're here as well.
And again, with the succession planning, we are promoting Percy Mercury to the office of sergeant in our police department. If he has any family members that would like to join him up here, that would be awesome.
The babies are all asleep right now.
So stay quiet.
A little bit about Perry before we administer his oath is that he's been with our department since 2015. However, he's been in law enforcement or public safety since 2008. He has been a police officer, a public safety officer at the McHenry County College, and he also worked as a police officer in the Village of Richmond. He is a lead homicide investigator for the department, a truck enforcement officer, a car seat technician, an accident investigator, and an officer in charge. I looked at his previous evaluations, and he's identified as a hard worker, and he is thorough and professional, and he has been acknowledged for his interpersonal skills and his leadership, initiative, and coachability. That's it.
Sounds good. Sounds like a sergeant to me. If you would repeat after me. State your name.
I, Kurt Curry,
Having been appointed
having been appointed
to the office of police sergeant
to the office of police sergeant
in the Village of Cary,
in the village of Cary,
in the county of McHenry aforesaid,
in the county of McHenry, aforesaid,
do do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
that I will faithfully discharge the duties
that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of Police Sergeant
of the office of Police Sergeant
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
And we should, yeah, we should identify, or, yeah, it's wife, number one. But number two, you should probably identify who you're with.
Oh, sorry. My wife Ashley,
Oh, baby.
my mom Marie, this is my baby girl Edith, and Henry's around here somewhere. He's struggling with the mother-in-law, or my mother-in-law.
He wants to be part of it. Here you go.
Those girls.
You want to do the other time?
I told you, we're all family.
He is a daddy boy.
As is customary, we'll have cake and coffee reception upstairs.
Of course you will. I'll just leave those two.
Yeah. We're on a budget here.
Do you have anything coming off the consent?
Number 7. I'll pull that off. So it's the chocolate, so we can discuss it.
We can vote on it separately if you want, but I don't think it's anything that's going to change on it.
Just, can you address some of the?
We can. Selkie property. We can.
Okay, on to regular business here. I'm going to be pulling off number 7 to be on the consent agenda to be addressed independently. So I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items number 1 through 6 as shown on the village's website and is displayed on the video monitor during the village board meeting.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Kraus,
Yes.
Collier,
Yes.
Betts,
Yes.
Weinhammer,
Yes.
Cavelli,
Yes.
And okay. And number 7, I will entertain a motion to approve an ordinance granting approval of a preliminary plan development and final plat of subdivision for the property located at 134 Northwest Highway.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Brian, why don't we go over a couple of the concerns that were brought up by some of the audience members about what has been approved, what has to be approved in the event of something changes, just to make some clarifications.
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor. Trustees, the request this evening is to, it's a preliminary PUD for the development. The Thornton's gas station was submitted, just for reference, submitted for permits under our prior zoning code. So that use is a permitted use within the B2 zoning district. They're still in for permits to construct that. So that specific use is not up for review this evening. It's going through the permitting process. They're still getting permits approved through IDOT. But under our previous zoning regulations, that use was an allowed use within the zoning district as long as it complied with zoning code for setbacks and other code requirements. It wouldn't have to go through the board review. It would just need to be submitted for building permits, which is where they're at. They're in that process now. Subsequent to that submittal, the village changed our regulations to develop the Unified Development Ordinance that did provide a provision for planned developments for any site that's over 2 acres in size from a commercial development standpoint would require to go through the development process for review and approval by the village board. The request this evening essentially is a plat of subdivision to create the plat or a parcel for that Thornton site. Technically, to develop the Thorntons, that plat of subdivision is not required. Is that that property where the, let me flip the exhibit here. The portion of the site, which is the north portion where the proposed plat or lot 1 is proposed, is currently on a single parcel. There's a parcel line which runs kind of east-west in this location here. So the property is comprised of 2 parcels, one to the north and one to the south. What the developers seeking approval for is a preliminary PUD just essentially to lay out that first parcel for Thorntons, to create the confines of that parcel and then lay out where future roadways or interconnects would go for the development as a whole. So you can see on this slide as far as how that Thornton's oil gas station would lay out with the proposed locations for drives. There would be 2 curb cuts onto Northwest Highway, proposed the existing location here, which IDOT has given preliminary approval for that location, and then another future access point that would align with the roadway across the Northwest Highway. A 3rd curb cut would be proposed along Jandas Cutoff that would provide access for all the development, cross-access easements, and other rights of way would be reserved for other lots within the subdivision. Additionally, in the preliminary plan development that's for review, they are proposing the location of stormwater detention or retention facilities, and then the location of utilities that would serve the site. So this slide's a little convoluted to understand where utilities are, but they would propose water running through the site that would loop through to Industrial Drive to the south, would provide sanitary services that would provide future development of the additional outlots that would tie into the lift station, which is constructed on the east end of the property. So previously the board had reviewed requests from the developer for waiver of certain requirements for the PUD development. That was back in October or November, I believe. So the plans that are submitted at this point are essentially to create the lot for the Thornton's gas station, and then a lot for the rest of the development, and then any future development of the site would require an amendment to the PUD to come back for both the zoning board and village board for additional approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the request. The ZPA did recommend approval of the request before you this evening.
And just as to reiterate, the PUD is a much more restrictive document that gives the board control over what can happen on these properties and these parcels that have been subdivided. One of the benefits to this is that any type of change or anything that happens here, they have to come before the village board. And the village board will make any final determination. So anything that people think may be changing, which we've been told when we went through the whole process, they told us they're not going to be a truck stop, they're not going to be a commercial fueling station, nor were they entertaining gaming, which we don't allow in gas stations anyway. So they were before us telling us this is what their plan is. The reason that they said they were picking up that additional piece of property was for additional commercial use, for shopping or stores or anything, and that's what they presented to us. So we have to, follow through with what their original plan was for this, and reassure the community that we have the final say if anything were to be changed. If they were to change, we're even thinking about changing it right now, they have to come back to the village board to make any type of changes. So again, this is just we've already approved the project. This is just approving the subdivision of this particular property. If there's any other legal things that I'm missing or that you want to chime in on, Scott?
Not necessarily. The idea of a PUD is it gives you greater latitude, flexibility, and control over the land uses. And this is the first land use to come forward, which has already been approved under the old ordinance. There's nothing else that requires the board's attention.
Is there any other questions that you need answered at this time?
So any changes that might come before us in the future, would they have to go before the zoning and planning board first? And then come before us?
Would it have to do with the use that they were intending it to be?
Correct. So if there's another development or another building that's constructed on the site, yes, that would go through the zoning board to amend the PUD, a public hearing be required, notify the surrounding property owners, and that would come before the village board for a final decision. Depending on what the project is, there may be, similar to this case, we had a preliminary discussion before and went through the zoning process at the board level, if there's any waivers that the developer is requesting of application requirements. So there may be additional conversation at the board level before it actually goes through the zoning process as well.
And on lot, if they're using lot one and they're putting up the gas station, if they were, once the gas station's up and running and they want to say add a commercial fueling part to that property, it would have to come to us for approval.
Correct.
Okay.
It would require an amendment to the PUD, so it has to go back to the zoning process.
Okay.
Would that go through zoning and planning first?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, we're going to have a discussion about the zoning and planning board later. And that's one of the concerns I have about adding this alternate member to the zoning and planning board. It's just taking away control from the board. And it makes it easier to put something before us with a positive recommendation versus a negative recommendation. And here we go, let's line up the cards. But, okay.
Any other questions on this?
I just had something real quick. This gentleman brought up there were some requirements that weren't met.
There's, within the application process, there were forms previously that when came before the village board and I forget the first request came before the village board, the board granted waivers for some of the application requirements. So what was presented, that what was presented to the zoning board was the zoning board determined that it complied with the standards and recommended approval of the request. But there were items that were part of the application requirements for a larger PUD based on the phase of the development that was in now. The village board determined that those were not required for this project.
The petitioner asked for those to be waived,
Okay.
and that was considered by the village board probably 2 months ago, give or take.
Yeah.
Okay.
A good example is, I think, the landscaping plan. I mean, they don't have enough information about where buildings are going to be sited, things of that nature. And so it
Sure.
doesn't make sense to roll out a landscaping plan that might not be relevant to the actual projects.
Right, and from where the project is at, basically what's essentially being approved here is a plat of subdivision. The issue in this case is that we're kind of at that what came first, the chicken or the egg scenario, from a standpoint that Thornton's submitted for permits under our previous zoning ordinances, but in order to subdivide the property, they're under our current ordinances. So the Thornton's gas station, or the gas station use in the corner, is being reviewed under our old zoning regulations, and the new one, the plat of subdivision, is essentially being reviewed under our current code.
Okay. So
So-
this is kind of a unique situation because normally this, I mean, this is.
Yes.
Correct. So if a developer, even in this site, wanted to develop one of the other parcels here, that plan would have a lot more detail going through the project. You would have the site plan, the building elevations, landscape plan, things like that, that would be reviewed by the board and be approved by the board as part of a project as well.
Mr. Henry, can you come up to the podium, please?
I have one question, due to the fact that, I mean, your ordinances are written for the PUD in this manner. You can see the requirements. What you're asking to approve right now is basically a plat of subdivision. Can you not approve a plat of subdivision but not the PUD at this time? And therefore, then they can focus on completing the PUD with the various requirements.
We would, I don't think so. You need the PUD in place in order to create this land division. That comes first. Because that's how a PUD works. The PUD lays out the essential development of the property, including all the infrastructure. It's essentially a subdivision, a huge subdivision that includes all these lots. And now we are carving out a particular lot for this use. So the PUD stands as, in this case, the big subdivision with all the subdivision improvements. That comes first. And now this is a lesser division of the PUD for a particular use.
Could you, can you come up to the board, or the podium, please?
Wouldn't this just be a 3-acre subdivision of the property?
That's not how this land is being developed. This particular lot is being developed as part of a larger PUD. So no, it's not a typical subdivision. This is not a standard subdivision, not the way it's laid out.
All right, did you say earlier that their next step is to submit for building permit? They're in for building permits. Has any of these items been addressed according, with their building permit?
He needs to ask.
Ask the board.
I'm sorry. I mean, if they're in for building permit at this point, have any of these items been addressed? I mean, I'm just asking you to follow your own ordinance. I'm not trying to be an idiot here.
Right, and we understand, the board has followed the ordinance with specificity. If you're looking at a particular finding that you think hasn't been made here or standard that hasn't been met, this has been before the board before this evening, multiple times, relative to the approval of the PUD.
Do we know that they're going to provide adequate buffering?
In the future, yes. As to this site, as each one of these lots comes in for development, as the village administrator noted, landscaping the site before the uses are identified and approved would be premature. You wouldn't have a use that they would be relating to. So as to this particular use, this gas station use, they are meeting the requirements that would be imposed for a particular use in this PUD. There'll be other uses coming forward. There'll be other lots in this PUD.
Right, but I'm saying on lot 1, they're in for building permit right now. They have not shown that they are going to provide parking and traffic for ingress and egress other than what was shown today, which has not been presented as part of this packet. They have not shown as far as a buffering goes. And are they still going to have to show that and get approval by the board prior to getting a building permit is my question at this point.
Let Brian
Right.
come back up here.
So from a site standpoint, again, this project submitted for building permits prior to our current zoning code, so zoning regulations. The plan as submitted complies with all the landscape requirements for screening from roadways and adjacent land uses, and also provides adequate parking and circulation for the proposed use. So it will comply. There's no variations that were requested from the developer. It complies with our standards for both parking, buffering, lighting, other development regulations we have for the development of that parcel. Future phases, if as one of the conditions of approval, as the plans would be modified going forward for other uses, those uses have to go for the amendment to the PUD, so it would require Trick and go through this process.
This is one of the unique situations here where they submitted before the adoption of the new code.
You could have grandfathered them in under the old code.
We would be less restrictive at that point. We are much more restrictive now with the PUD. It gives us by far more control as what the village would like to see. Had they been able to go through this whole process under the old code, we wouldn't even be having this conversation because they would be able to do it already. So we are being much more restrictive and making people more compliant in what the village wants by having this PUD.
Okay, I've just never seen a PUD approved before without a plan, so.
Any other questions?
All good questions here. All good questions by the board.
Any questions? No. Okay, with no other questions, roll call, Courtney, please.
Weinhammer? Yes. Kraus?
Yes.
Betts? Yes. Collier?
Yes.
Billy?
Yes.
Thank you. Next is, I need a public hearing for the Spring Oaks, which is now called Lions Ridge Subdivision Annexation Agreement. Is there anybody here that is in regards to that? Is there anybody objecting to this?
Right, so you want to open the public hearing, which you can do yourself. Just clear it open.
I have a cheat sheet here, right here. Okay, I'd like to open the hearing with regards to the the amendment for the Spring Oaks Estates Lions Ridge subdivision for their annexation agreement. We have a staff presentation that will kind of fill us in on these things. We have somebody here that's representing the petitioner. Is there anybody here that is in opposition of this annexation agreement?
Or would like to
Okay.
comment.
Pardon me?
Or would like to comment.
Or would like to comment on it? Brian, could you proceed, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. The request, again, this evening is a request to amend various terms of the 2004 annexation agreement for what was originally known as the Spring Oaks Estates subdivision, which is now part of the Lions Ridge subdivision. As the board is aware, the development has a few lots that are remaining to be developed, and development has slowed in that area where there are 6 lots that are currently remaining to be developed. 3 of those lots are along Three Oaks Road and 3 are further back within the subdivision. The subdivision has been substantially built out as far as utilities, roadways, and pedestrian ways as well. The request this evening is to reduce the annexation fee, which was in that agreement. Per the terms of the agreement, there is a $8,000 per unit annexation fee that is due at the time of building permit due to the slowdown, if you will, of permits being issued for the subdivision and the stalling of development in the site. The petitioner is asking to amend the terms of the agreement to reduce that fee from $8,000 down to $2,000. That percentage decrease is similar to a similar decrease that the village approved for another subdivision within the village of Cary within the last few years. Petitioner is also here, can provide additional information, but staff is recommending support of the proposed amendment.
And that would, Director Simmons, just to clarify, that was for the Westlake subdivision, correct?
Correct. The other subdivision was the Westlake subdivision.
Thank you.
Does the board have any comments or questions? I don't think there is. I think this is pretty much a...
Close the public hearing.
Anybody else have any comments regarding this hearing? We'll go ahead and close the hearing at 6:46. Okay. Now, to finalize this, I will entertain a motion to approve an ordinance granting an amendment to the annexation agreement for the Spring Oaks Estates, now Lions Ridge subdivision.
So moved.
Second.
Any further questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Betts,
Yes.
Weinhammer,
Yes.
Cavelli,
Yes.
Collier,
Yes.
Kraus,
Yes.
Thank you. Administrator's report. Jake, do you have anything?
Mayor, Village Board, I just wanted to remind our residents, January 18th will be our first budget workshop meeting for this next fiscal year. It will be a Saturday starting at 9 a.m. in this room.
Thank you. Department heads, Chief Finland, Director Morimoto. Michael? No, sir. Thank you. Any future agenda items and discussion by the village board? Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There are no nays. We'll regroup in just a minute.